What is up, my friends? 138 MMA here, and I'm going to break down the co-main event of our UFC 287 pay-per-view. We have Jorge Masvidal taking on Gilbert Burns. This matchup is a lot closer than a lot of people are thinking. I know that everybody's saying Gilbert Burns by a landslide, but I want to break this down because I do think this is a close matchup, and I'll give you my pick at the end, but I want to get into what these guys have, skill-wise, how they line up, and kind of pass the victory for both guys. But real quick, thank you to everyone who has supported me over on patreon.com/138MMA. Your support means the world to me. There are so many different options for everyone over there. Actually, there's 4 options. But you can find the tier that you like the best, whether you just want to support the channel or you want me to break down specific fights for you. Whatever you want, it's there, and you can access it at patreon.com/138MMA. And everybody that has joined up over there already, I appreciate you very much. There's going to be a slide showing my appreciation to you very shortly. And then also, if you want to find me on Twitter or Tapology, you can find me at 138MMA, because that's the name, so go figure. But I appreciate everyone's support. Thank you so much for helping this channel grow. And let's go and break down this fight, shall we?
You wanted the picks, you got the picks. The hottest picks in the
Matchup
world.
here, we have Jorge Masvidal taking on Gilbert Burns in the welterweight division. Both guys were former lightweights, moved up to welterweight to have some different level of success there. In their last 5 fights, Gilbert Burns 3-2, Masvidal 2-3. The losses for both guys are to the highest of level, okay? So the 2-3 and 3-2, you look at that and you go, man, I thought these guys were title contenders. What's up with that? Yeah, well, you're losing to some of the better guys in the division. So it's not like these guys are getting beat by tomato cans. Masvidal has lost to Usman twice and Covington once. Okay, makes sense. Burns lost to Usman once and Chimaev the other time. So both guys losing to the top tier fighters in the division. For these two here, I do think that there are title implications, but I know what a lot of people are thinking, that if Burns wins, he should be next in line for a title. I don't think so. I do think that both guys need another win after this in order to get there. And that's just me personally. Obviously, Bilal Muhammad is the guy that I would pick to go up there. The guy's got like a 9-fight win streak, but whatever. We've got Covington fighting for the title next. Bilal is probably next, assuming he gets through Shavkat Rakhmonov. Anyway, after the lay of the land, let's break down the fight that we came here to break down, shall we? Both guys on the further side of the 30s, the later side of their 30s, 36 and 38, so they're getting towards the end of the career. They need to make things happen now. And this matchup, it lines up interestingly because, yes, it's kind of that striker versus grappler, but both guys have adapted to add the other's game to their game. So let's start with the striking of Gilbert Burns. Now, obviously, we know him as a grappler first and foremost. He's multiple-time world champion in jiu-jitsu. But we're looking at Gilbert Burns in the striking realm. So striking, he does have good striking at this point in his career. And the thing that I think is the most successful for him is he comes forward with forward pressure and uses that block and return style. So he'll block the shots, let him hit him on the arms, and then strike back either with a big overhand or a hook. Most of the time, yes, he can throw straight shots, but most of the time he's blocking, in tight like this, lets the guard eat the punches coming from his opponent, and then just throws a big shot with that power that he does have. So for Gilbert Burns, the block and return goes along really well with his forward pressure, and I do think that is kind of his primary style of striking. Now, he does have more facets to the game, so he likes to feint his takedowns and use that to set up his strikes, whether he's going to use that to go low, hit you to the body, or feint low like that and then come over the top with an overhand, or whatever he's going to do. I mean, that's the traditional style of grapplers. When they go to strike, is they use the takedown threat to open up their striking. And Gilbert Burns does it pretty well. He's also very good at coming forward with his leg kicks. He has a very hard leg kick, and because of his style, where he's kind of wider and lower in his stance, he can throw that big leg kick and then get back out, or throw that leg kick and get in. But because of that stance, he's also susceptible to eating the leg kicks on his own, of his opponents. So he's got that wide stance, right? Now, like I said, he can come in with that big leg kick and get back out because he's usually the shorter fighter. But when he eats those leg kicks on his own, he does not really check them whatsoever. He just eats them, but then tries to counter with his hands. And it's worked for him so far. Nobody's stopped him with leg kicks or anything like that. But it is an issue because you don't want to just eat leg kicks like that. It's I would say that's a hole in his game. But other than that, so far he's been pretty good. Now, with the biggest problem for Burns is that he can be sucked into a brawl, at least on the feet. This is the biggest problem for him. And we saw that in the Khamzat Chimaev fight. So he got sucked into a brawl there. Now, that was a good fight, don't get me wrong, and Burns definitely landed some good shots. He definitely won a round in that matchup. I do think Chimaev won the fight. I think it was a clear decision for him, 2-1. But Burns got sucked into a brawl rather than being able to, dictate how the fight took place. And I do think that brawl helped Gilbert Burns at times, but it also hurt him at others, because when he gets into a brawl, he can be caught loading up on his shots. And he'll just really want to throw that big power shot. And for Burns, that's great, because when he lands it, he's got serious power. We saw him drop Kamaru Usman in their matchup, and obviously Usman got up and won, but he was able to drop Usman, and Usman, before the Leon Edwards head kick, was known for having a pretty good chin. But Burns will get roped into those big, wild, heavy shots because he's falling in love with that power just a little bit. And that's going to be a problem against a guy like Masvidal. So for Jorge Masvidal, he is probably the better striker here, and I don't think anybody's going to argue that. He has very solid striking, but he's crafty, and that's the thing that makes it kind of different. His style is super hard to counter in the striking department. We've seen a lot of other high-level strikers struggle to strike with Masvidal. Now, I know I've got a lot written up here, but I want to point out the thing first. I spelled rhythm wrong. His best part of his striking game is using this difficult rhythm that he has to get his opponents off guard, to get his opponents to not really know what's coming and when it's coming. He strikes in a way that, a lot of people strike in like a predictable rhythm, and I don't think that's crazy to think. But a lot of people also probably, my coach used to get on me for this. He'd say, you can't work out to music, because when you do, you get to throwing in patterns with the beat, like the, ba, 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 you know what I mean? Like that, obviously not like that slow, but something like that. So for Masvidal, he doesn't do that. He either uses a kind of a broken rhythm or like frantically changing the tempo style of his striking, and I think that's the hardest thing for his opponents to deal with, and it's also even kind of hard for me to explain the way he does it without showing you how he does it. But either way, so when he strikes like this, it could be and it's then he goes slow, fast, slow, fast, like it just changes things up, and it's not in a predictable pattern. And I think that's the hardest thing for people to deal with for Masvidal, and that's what he's had a lot of success with. He also mixes this in with kind of like a flick of his lead hand that's not a jab, but you try to block it like a jab, but he just uses it to flick your arms out of the way and then come back with that heavy right hand, and he'll use that as a way to separate the guard. So if he wants, for a guy like Burns who comes in, blocks to get ready to return, flicking that arm out of the way instead of throwing the jab like most guys do, and then throwing that could be a path to landing clean on Gilbert Burns. Now, do I think that's going to just end Burns in one shot? No. But Masvidal is pretty darn good on the feet, and that's what I'm talking about. He also has very good head movement, keeps his head off the center line a lot of the time. He's able to counter-strike very well. He feints very often, and I think the thing that's the most important thing about his feinting is he can read the reaction to those feints and his own strikes better than most. So in a lot of Masvidal fights, we've seen him set up his strikes with, by obviously the feint, but by reading his opponent's reaction to that and then changing how he goes about it. A lot of guys that feint a lot use it to kind of get their opponent to freeze, which is a good strategy. Don't get me wrong. Adesanya is known for doing that, and who is also fighting on this card, getting his opponent to freeze up and then he goes in. Masvidal, yes, he can get his opponent to freeze with his feints, but he's also trying to find out how does my opponent react to this, and then he's going to change the follow-up shot to come through. We saw it in, I don't remember. I couldn't tell you who he's fighting. It's a drawn a blank. But he's throwing the jab out here, right? And he's seeing how his opponent is slipping differently than most people slip from a jab, because traditionally you want to slip outside of a punch, but he was slipping inside the punch, which I don't know what he was doing there, but he was. So Masvidal then says, okay, I'm going to set up this kick to come behind it, to come through here, but in a way that you think you're getting the two. So he throws, feints the two to get the opponent to further the slip, and then comes up with not even like a roundhouse kick, but like kind of like a hybrid between like a roundhouse kick and like a football punt or whatever. Just like straight through, hits the guy in the face. So he's done that quite a few times. He changes his strikes based on how he's reading his opponent's reaction. He does it very quickly rather than this slower over the course of the fight. his striking is some of the best in the welterweight division. Let's put it that way. Obviously, guys like Wonder Boy are going to be better, but like in this style, I'm giving it to Masvidal as far as one of the better strikers in the division. And I do think he's a far better striker than Gilbert Burns. Now, another thing that's interesting is he catches kicks not to go for the takedown, but instead to strike back. He'll catch your kick, and then instead of going for the takedown like a lot of people do or trying to flip you over, he then strikes and tries to hold onto your leg and start throwing punches at you to make, because you're eating these punches on one foot. And Gilbert Burns, being a kicker in that of himself, he likes to throw those kicks to get into range, like I was saying about the leg kick. He can also throw body kicks. Don't get me wrong there. He's got a wide variety of strikes. But Masvidal likes to catch these kicks and then strike back to then, land the damage, get them to the ground. Because once he gets them to the ground, when he's on top, his ground and pound is very vicious. As I mentioned right over here, he's got aggressive ground and pound where he comes through with the flurries. And he usually does that off of a caught kick, strikes or hurt the opponent, and then come down on top and land that ground and pound. So last thing for Masvidal on the striking is the flying knees. Now I know we all know about the Ben Askren knockout, one of the best in history. Don't get me wrong, good knockout. I've gotcha. But he's also used that in other fights to stop the takedown, whether he's from standing position, realizes the opponent's getting ready to shoot a takedown, and then flying knee, or just throws those flying knees up the middle because his opponent is ducking his head, or his opponent is, whatever his opponent's trying to do. If their head movement goes this way at all, he's throwing those flying knees. And he lands them at a high enough clip that it makes it hard for people to want to put their head in that position. So for me, I do think Masvidal is going to be the better striker here. I think it's pretty it's pretty clear. So we're going to give Masvidal, who's probably the blue corner here, so that we're going to use the blue marker. We're going to give Masvidal the edge in the striking, and I don't think that's crazy to say. But we're going to look at the grappling, because Masvidal is a good grappler in his own right. Let's go ahead and finish out with Masvidal here. He is a good grappler in his own right, and he has a very solid sprawl. When guys shoot on him looking for that double leg, whatever, he's able to kick those legs, get his hips back, kick those feet back, and then stuff that takedown. And he does it very well. In the event that they do get him to the ground, he does create scrambles well, whether that's from striking off his back with elbows, which we've seen in a few of his fights, or just holding the top down, kicking the legs out, and then pushing them off. He's done that a few times, does that really well to create the scramble. Now, creating a scramble against a guy like Gilbert Burns might be a problem because Gilbert Burns is so good on the ground. It may, instead of, Masvidal has Burns in his guard, now he created the scramble and Burns is on his back. So that could be a problem. I wrote it as a positive, but in this matchup, it actually could be a negative. We're going to get to that in a minute. But anyway, he's good at controlling his opponents from his back as well. If he realizes there's not a whole lot of time left in the round, it's not worth trying to force your way back up and maybe end up in a worse position. He's good at holding his opponents in place. He can lock them in his guard and just really tie up their arms and just keep them there. And he's done that a few times just to ride out the round because he knows that the next round is going to start on the feet. And we all know how his striking stacks up against most fighters in the welterweight division, especially the grapplers. Let's put it that way. So, from his back, very good at controlling the opponent. He's defensively solid as far as the submissions go. He systematically breaks down the submission while he's in it. So, say he's in a rear naked choke. He's not panicking. He's not freaking out. He's fighting the hands, okay, whatever, working through that. Say he's in a triangle. Instead of doing all the silly stuff, we're trying to pick him up and slam him like so. He's, okay, what do I need to do technically here? Okay, make sure I can get my arm to the other side so that doesn't get across and cause the pressure on the arteries there in the neck. Okay, then I need to start stacking. Okay, get myself angled off the correct direction, whatever. So Masvidal's doing the right things systematically. Even if he's in serious trouble, he doesn't panic ever, and his submission defense is pretty solid because of that. Now, if he can get on top, as I mentioned, his ground and pound is great. Some of the more vicious ground and pound in the welterweight division, but there are some negatives in his grappling. Now, he is a good grappler. It has been added because he started as a striker, but he's a good grappler. The problems: he can be held up against the cage. We saw that Usman was able to hold him against the cage pretty easily, and I believe it was their first match where he kind of held him there and foot stomped him. Or was that the second one? One of them, I don't remember. But one of them, he held him up against the cage and foot stomped him. Yeah, and we've seen that in other matches for Masvidal. He's been able to be held up against the cage for minutes at a time. Also, he seems to struggle to defend the single leg. Not because the double leg, he has that 6 sprawl, but if they get a hold of one of his legs, he doesn't quite have the same takedown defense off of a single leg as he does a double leg. So I do think, I'm going to use the red because Gilbert Burns is probably red corner, that this is going to be a issue for Masvidal because that single leg is there all day for Gilbert Burns, who I do think has pretty good takedowns. For being primarily a jiu-jitsu guy, his wrestling isn't bad. Now, we're going to go ahead and break down his grappling. He does have high-level Brazilian jiu-jitsu, as we talked about, world champion, yada, yada. But he's got a very large toolbox on the ground. Now, he has gotten away from his jiu-jitsu quite a bit in recent memory. Aside from the Neil Magny fight, obviously he got Magny to the ground, got the submission and inside of the first round, whatever, got the arm triangle or whatever. Anyway, he's gotten away from it a little bit because he's fallen in love with his hands. And I think it was the Khamzat Chimaev fight that kind of reminded Gilbert Burns, oh, hey, you know what? I've got this grappling, and because I wasn't able to use that in that matchup because I got too excited about having a good, fun fight, I ended up losing that fight. And guess what? I'm already 36 years old. I need to start racking up these wins impressively if I want to get a title shot anytime soon. And he's even expressed that in interviews that he needs to get finishes now if he wants a title shot. So I do think Burns is starting to lean back to looking at more of his jiu-jitsu side because he knows how good he is on the ground. But he's gotten away from it for a little bit, and I don't want him to fall in love with the brawl in this matchup for the sake of him getting a win. If he's going to get the win, he doesn't need to fall in love with the brawl. Now, on the Masvidal side, Masvidal says, hey, let's make this a brawl. Let's get him fired up, and let's make him come and want to strike with me because for Masvidal, he knows that he's going to be the better striker here. Now, back to what we were talking about, the grappling of Gilbert Burns. He has near perfect defense on the ground. I don't think Masvidal is going to be able to lock up anything, although something to take note, Masvidal does have a good Darce choke. I don't know why I didn't write that up there. He has a pretty darn good Darce choke, and he's able to threaten with it quite often in his matchups. He doesn't often get it because he doesn't really seek it often. He usually would rather go to the ground and pound, but he does have a good Darce choke. I don't think he's going to land that on Gilbert Burns. Probably why I didn't write it up here. He can reverse the position or get back to his feet against just about anyone. We saw it in the Damian Maia fight. Gilbert Burns was able to fend off Damian Maia, who was on his back, threatening a rear naked choke. That's incredibly difficult because we all know Damian Maia is one of the best jiu-jitsu players to ever do it in MMA. Gilbert Burns was able to hold his own, get back to his feet, work the defense, whatever. So like I said, defensively, he's solid. If it's on the ground, he's as safe as can be. Whether he's on the top, on the bottom, does not matter. He can control from any position, whether he's on his back, on the top, etc. We already know this stuff. Here's the thing, though. For Gilbert Burns, if he is able to secure the takedown, which I think he's got a shot because, like I said, the single leg is open for him. If he's able to secure the takedown, he can advance position a number of ways. It can be with his skill or with his athleticism because Gilbert Burns is fairly athletic. He's actually quite athletic. For a guy who's going to be smaller than a lot of welterweights, he's very powerful and explosive. And he can use that to advance position, but he can also use his skill. So if skill isn't working, he's got the athleticism. If he's just going on a wave of momentum, he's got that athleticism. However, if that's not working for him and he is outmatched physically, chances are he's going to be the more skilled guy on the ground. So for Gilbert Burns, he's going to be able to advance position if he can get this to the mat. Even against a guy who is very good at controlling from his back, I think Gilbert Burns is going to have a massive advantage on the ground. So, particularly because single leg there. So when it comes to this matchup, it's really going to depend on how this matchup plays out. And I think we have Burns currently like minus 450 or something crazy like that. I don't like the odds because I do think Masvidal is a real shot because we've seen Gilbert Burns be able to get baited into a brawl before. Just kidding, that was the wrong marker. We've seen him get baited into a brawl before. And I do think it's possible that he could get baited into a brawl again, in which case Masvidal is going to win the fight. However, I'm going to pick Gilbert Burns because we saw in his last matchup, he did not play around with Magny. He did not screw around on the feet. He went for the takedown. He got the fight to the mat and went for the submission right away. So I'm going to take Gilbert Burns, but I don't think it's as one-sided as the odds may suggest. And that's why I wanted to do this deep breakdown because I think a lot of people are just saying, oh yeah, Burns for sure. I wanted to give you guys all the tools because as I've mentioned on this channel before, some of the newer people may not have heard it. I don't want to just put out my picks and then you just tail everything I say and say, oh yeah, bet on everybody he picked. I want to give you the opportunity to look at the information that I've gathered. Maybe you haven't spent 25, 30 hours a week breaking down tape for a fight card. I don't blame you. Most of us don't have that time. I don't either, but I do it anyway. But anyway, I wanted to give you the option to see what I come up with and then kind of use your own thought to like, well, yeah, maybe I do think Masvidal is going to get the win because of this, or maybe I do think Gilbert Burns is going to get the win because of this. I'm not saying just tail everything I say because that's silly. Come to your own conclusions. Use the information I've given you and then bounce it off stuff that you've noticed in fights yourself. That's what I want to do for you guys. And that's why on patreon.com/138MMA, you get access to all of my notes as soon as I'm done taking them. So this fight is already up on the Patreon, as well as some others coming up too. But this is already up on the Patreon. You can check out the notes for this fight. I always put my confidence ratings for those. This is on the friend tier. So if you are a friend of the channel, you already know this. But check that out if you're interested. If not, hey, whatever, no big deal. Just go and subscribe to this video and hit like for me because I appreciate you all and I know you enjoyed this breakdown. So I'll see you guys in the full card breakdown. Take it easy, friends, and see you soon.